Hello, fourth graders. We are almost finished with Out of My Shell, which has been a wonderful chapter book for us. And we're on page 190, chapter 22. So we will finish this book by tomorrow for sure, start a new book. And the information for chapter 22, the average lifespan for a loggerhead sea turtle in the wild is 50 or more years. My grandparents and I eventually fell asleep on the living room couches. When daylight crept in through the windows the following morning, we loaded up in the car, yawning with what was left of the lemon crumb muffins. Lainey looked so tiny in the hospital bed, like a pearl nestled in a clamshell. She was asleep when we arrived. Tubes ran like tentacles from her arms, one hooked to a mask strapped to her face. Machines whirred and clicked behind her. Mom rose from her cot to greet us, stretching and feigning a smile. Careful not to wake Lainey, I tucked her stuffed sloth next to her on the bed. Water got into her lungs, Mom said shakily. It caused some inflammation, and she's having trouble getting enough oxygen. They x-rayed her chest a little while ago. We're waiting for the results. Grandpa and Grandma surrounded her, and Mom fell into their embrace. It occurred to me that I was adrift, standing alone outside their circle. That wasn't what I wanted anymore. I took a step forward, and Mom extended an arm and brought me in close. When we broke apart, Mom half laughed, half moaned, I desperately need some coffee. She wiped a tear with her thumb before it ran down her cheek. I noticed a cafe on the way in. She won't miss us if we're gone for a few minutes, Grandma said. Her lips pensively bunched together as she softly patted the base of Lainey's bed. As they started to leave, I hung back. Okay if I stay with Lainey? I asked. Mom glanced from Lainey's serene, waxen face to mine and nodded. She looked me deep in the eye and said, I'd appreciate it if you did live. Thank you. She didn't veil her concern as she left the room, a step behind Grandma and Grandpa. And the way she'd spoken unsteady, but in a voice that was true and open, made me feel better and worse all at once. This was the mom I'd been craving, not the one who'd been speaking in careful and unnatural tones anytime things got uncomfortable. She'd been trying to hide her brokenness from me, like when she cried in the pantry. But it made me sad to think it took something like this, like my sister almost drowning, for her to let me see her real emotions. But hadn't I been doing the exact same thing, pretending everything was fine, trying to convince Dad and my friends I was having a good time so no one would worry about me? And then, when things got worse, instead of speaking up, I pulled away. That hadn't worked either. Lainey lying before me in a hospital bed was the most unsettling proof it hadn't. Yes, she was still here because I had been there for her when she needed me. I didn't need to be perfect. Things didn't need to be perfect for me to be there for my family. Being myself was enough, and that's all I wanted from them in return. Maybe that was part of growing up, realizing that life was full of contradictions, like how you could feel the most alone in a crowd of people, and how you could be halfway across the country and still hold someone near in your heart. How people could have entirely different interests and personalities and still be close. How the person who annoyed you more than anyone else in the world could also be one of the people you cared the most about. I was pondering that particular contradiction when Lainey opened her eyes. She sleepily pulled the mask away from her nose and mouth and said my name. Olivia. The wheeze in her voice was frightening. Shh, don't talk, I said. Put the mask back on. She shook her head. Did you find it? Find what? The balloon, the turtle. Yes, we cut her free, I said, then inwardly scolded myself. Asking questions would only keep her talking. No, the mermaid tear. What? A nurse entered the room, then bustled up to Lainey's bed. Oh no, not yet. You need to keep that on a little longer. Doctor's orders. Lainey dolefully returned the mask to her face. It's supplemental oxygen, the nurse explained. Her chest x-ray looked good. She'll need medicine to keep her lungs and blood healthy, but she'll be all right. Don't you worry. The nurse patted my hand, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. He had crinkly lines around his eyes and mouth and short, curly black hair. His smile was kind and reassuring. I bet people tell you how much the two of you look alike all the time. I knew the moment I saw you that you were sisters. I almost said, no, people say I look like my dad. But when I skimmed my sister's features, I decided that maybe some of me was mirrored in her, and vice versa. I shrugged and said, I guess so. I was more like her and she like me than I'd ever wanted to admit. Then the mob arrived. We heard them coming long before they met it in the door of the hospital room. The twins entered first, starting right up to Lainey's bed. They shoved flowers in her face. Aunt Michelle, Uncle Angelo followed on their heels. Behind them, my mom and grandparents shuffled back in. Lainey's eyes tracked the movement, and her eyebrows rose joyfully at the commotion. She was enjoying the attention. Mom, on the other hand, tensed when Aunt Michelle glanced her way. I could tell she was expecting an "I told you so" from her older sister. Aunt Michelle had accused her of not keeping a close enough eye on us, and now here was Lainey lying in a hospital bed, having nearly drowned. But instead of chastising her, Aunt Michelle reached out and pulled my mom to her. She clasped her hands as she did. Mom's cell phone rang. Mom broke away. Sorry, I have to take this, she said. From the look on her face and the strain in her voice, I could tell it was Dad on the other end. Yes, she'll be okay, Mom spoke into her phone. No, I don't know what her blood pressure is. Yes, I can ask. Isn't there a rule about cell phones in hospital rooms? Aunt Michelle said snidely. She whipped to her grandma while Mom continued to give Dad an update. Can you believe him? The mob sneered. Watch him grill her for a full medical report. I wouldn't be surprised if he tells the doctors what they're doing wrong. That man is ridiculous, an insufferable know-it-all. Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. That man is Lainey's and my father, I said, cool and calm. I wasn't hiding my emotions, but I was in control of them. And he's worried. I didn't erupt the way I had when things upset me before, and I didn't bite my tongue either. My steadiness surprised me, but something about what I'd been through in the past 24 hours made me feel I was capable of anything. I'd rescued hatchlings. I rescued my sister. I'd finally convinced Mr. Emerson to do something about the light coming from the beachcomber. Me, not Dad, not Aiden, not anyone else. I was a force to be reckoned with, and Aunt Michelle had pushed me too far. Of course, Dad wants information, I continued. How would you feel if you were thousands of miles away and found out Cisco or Diego nearly died? Wouldn't you want to know as much as possible about your kid's condition? Aunt Michelle measured me with her eyes. Well, I didn't mean anything by it, she snapped. Yes, you did. You don't like my father, and you never have, but that doesn't mean you get to say cruel things about him. You also don't get to decide where we live or tell my mom what to do. Mom's eyes grew wide. She was still on the phone with Dad, but she'd overheard everything that had been said. Her lips curled into a smile, and she beamed at me with pride. My aunt seemed as shocked as I was by my fledgling confidence. She gaped, but for once, she was at a loss for words. The nurse stepped forward and politely suggested, it might be best for Lainey if you take turns visiting. All this excitement isn't good for her. Aunt Michelle looked at me, looked at the nurse, and nodded her head. She relented. Grandma and Grandpa took the first shift. That way, Mom could go back to the house to grab a hot shower, and the mob could get settled in. On the way out of the hospital, Mom reported that Dad had booked a flight for the following weekend as soon as he could possibly get away. We're going to stop right there, the bottom of page 196, and it looks like we'll probably finish this book tomorrow. Thanks so much, fourth graders. I hope you're doing well. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you later.